Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Sorcery Self-Defense, we are going to be discussing using a spell chain to follow links from spellcraft. Okay, so what is a spell chain? A spell chain, also known as prayer beads, is used both in prayer for Catholicism and meditation in several forms of Buddhism. How we will be using a spell chain is actually in a very similar manner. You can use a literal chain, but typically you want to use beads. Really, you can use anything that will pull through your hand smoothly, but I like to use something similar to the typical design. So they're round, they're smooth, round beads. These ones are actually peas that I grew in my garden and strung onto a string. It needs to be connected at both ends, smooth, with no distinct spots where it interrupts the flow of beads through your hand. Okay, so this is the prayer bead, the prayer beads or spell chain. How do we use the spell chain? I do have a video where I discussed what we use the spell chain for, where I discuss going out, following the link to a bottle that is connected to you and changing the intent of the bottle. But we will get into more detail on that here. But let's go with that first example. And let's say you like that I do in that video, and let's say that you have someone, you suspect you have curse work cast upon you. Okay, so you take the spell chain, place it in your hands like so, and begin focusing on yourself. You close your eyes for this. Begin focusing on yourself and pulling the beads through your hand. This gives you a starting point, yourself. And as you pull the beads through your hand, imagine that you are tracing the lines of fate around you, and this time you are looking for any spell work. So, pull the chain through your hands. Focus on yourself. Don't actually think about looking for spell work. You want to be focusing on yourself and pulling the chain through your hands. As you pull the chain through your hands, if there is spell work on you, it will feel like your focus is being kind of peeled away by the beads. Like as you pull them, it kind of draws your focus away from where you were and on a line. Continue pulling as you're following this line. Pay attention. Go ahead and acknowledge any images that come across, but you want to keep your focus on the bead chain itself while this is going on. Any images that you see will be hints, but you don't want them to distract you. So keep focused on the link until you come to the other side. You will feel this when you get there because there will be an image that is in the foreground of your imagination or your visualization. We shouldn't say imagination. We don't want to be imagining things. We do want to be allowing the visualization in. So, when you have hit the other end, you will feel more intense visualization. This will typically be taking the form of either the person that has cast the spell or the item that they have used that is now still connected to you, because every time we cast spell work, there is a link going from ourselves to the person we are casting to, or from the item we have contained the spell work in out to them. Even if we are doing a intent form charge release and sending out a sigil to another person, there is a link backwards until you cut that cord. This is a way of following that cord. So, like I said, if you have spell work cast on you, you will focus on yourself, close your eyes, pull your hands through, and when your focus gets pulled onto a line, allow yourself to go. Do not get distracted by errant thoughts and flashes that may come to you on the way to the destination. When you get there, you will feel almost a stop, I guess is the best way to put it. And when you were there, you can then mark that area with a sigil for later reference, and you can even come back to it again on the spell chain by focusing on the sigil and pulling the chain through your hands again, imagining that you are traveling to that sigil. We can actually use the spell chain for other things besides just finding who and what has cursed you. But let's continue on first with finding spell links. So, you can do this for another person by focusing on them, pulling the hands through the chain, and following any cords connected to them. This doesn't have to just be spell work. You can actually trace back any line you can find with this. You can allow your mind's eye to essentially remote view back across that line to its other location, to its, what would you want to say, anchor. Okay, so, like I said, we can do this with a person. We can do this with an item. If you find an item and you want to know who has been casting the spell linked to that item, you can use the spell chain to do that by focusing on the item in the same manner that you would yourself or the other target. Now, I said there are other uses for this as well. I mentioned in previous videos about using your personal sigil as an anchor point so that you can travel back to these locations. One way to do this, if you have trouble with remote viewing locations and astral projection, which we all struggle with at times, even those of us that are good at it, what you can do is focus on where you have your personal sigil, focus on that location and that personal sigil, and you have a link to it. Yeah? You have a link to your personal sigil, of course. Anywhere it's drawn, you've created a link to that place. You can use spell chain, same way for that. Focus on your personal sigil that is in that location, and imagine the line, and then simply place the beads in your hands and pull them along, focusing on the spell chain, becoming the link, and following it to that location. And with something like that, you may not feel an abrupt stop, but since you're viewing those images, those flashes that you get along the way, well, they're of a little more value now, because that's more what you're aiming for in that type of situation. Even once you hit the stop, you want to just keep, or excuse me, because even if you feel a stop by hitting the sigil and you're like, okay, I've hit my sigil, if you continue to keep seeing images, you might as well just keep pulling the beads through your hands. I've had that happen before, where I've gotten to the location and I actually have seen my sigil, like feel myself coming up to it, but I'm still seeing things. So in that period, you want to go ahead and just keep pulling the beads through your hand just to maintain focus, and imagine yourself being there, or visualize it. Like I said, we should avoid the word imagination. Okay, so that will be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. And don't forget to join us on our next episode of Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 1, where we will actually be discussing creating these types of links and how that is done. Okay, so until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tell.